My personal learning map project was centered around strategies to help English language learners find theme. The nature of my project was twofold. To begin with, I wanted to identify some strategies that I could use in my own targeted reading classrooms to help my EL students find theme. Secondly, I wanted to create a quick guide for classroom teachers to use so that they could also help their English language learners find theme during core reading. As a little bit of background knowledge, the samples that I was working with were 4th and 5th grade students at Westwood Intermediate School. My English language learners run the gamut from a WIDA 1.5 up into a WIDA 4.4, which would be really close to exiting. So there's a wide range of English proficiency levels. All of the students I worked with were receiving targeted reading services, so they were at the 23rd percentile or lower on their previous year's MAP score. What I noticed in PLCs was that a lot of teachers were coming to me asking about strategies to help their English language learners find theme. And what we were seeing was that these students who were identified as EL were struggling at higher levels than their 4th and 5th grade peers. Finding theme is a very complicated higher level target for our students. And so there's a lot of kids who are not ELs that struggle with finding theme. And these strategies that I've identified will also be beneficial to them. But since I am an EL teacher, the focus really here is on the language acquisition that the students will need to find theme. What I also noticed is that while there are strategies that are pretty quick and easy to pass on to classroom teachers to help them find with comprehension or main idea and details, there aren't a lot of scaffolds or pre-made materials that teachers can just use in their classroom. Initially, I was hoping to take a look at some of the students' scores from their different summatives that dealt with theme, but classroom teachers had already passed those materials back. So I decided in my targeted reading group, I would do a pre-test and post-test to gather some information about my students. Before we get into that, I did kind of talk about my guiding changes already, but my current context and reality was that in my targeted reading class, only 15% of my 4th and 5th grade students were able to find theme at the beginning of this project. And as I mentioned earlier, this was indicative of a larger school-wide trend. I had 3 desired results. My first one was that I wanted to improve my student understanding of theme within my targeted reading class. And my success criteria for that was moving from 15% to 80%, which was pretty ambitious. My second desired result was to then create a reference sheet for classroom teachers to use as a tool or as a guide when they were teaching theme. And that success criteria would be that the document would be put in the hands of teachers at the beginning of the 2018-2019 school year. And with those 2 things in play, my hope then would be that school-wide we would see an increase in EL students' ability to find theme as measured by common formative and summatives. Unacceptable mean what we're looking at is that the scaffolds need to be aligned with district standards. Mini lessons needed to be engaging and relevant to students within this particular grade level, and lessons needed to take into account the diverse cultural and linguistic backgrounds of students. We needed to make sure that we were using materials that were accessible to all teachers, and they needed to fit into a larger unit plan. So really asking teachers to add in something that was going to take another week or 2 isn't realistic, but so we needed to think about mini lessons. And also, when we're talking about things, passing things on to classroom teachers, with EL, there's a lot of jargon, as is true for most of education. So I really wanted to make sure that any sheets, any guides that I'm giving to teachers are easily understandable to someone who doesn't necessarily have an advanced linguistics background. So what I did to get some background knowledge, I had students who were given a pretest of a 2nd grade reading level passage where they were asked to identify theme. We did some work to build background knowledge prior to reading the story to try to rule out the variable of cultural differences. Since this particular story took place at a swimming pool, we did some work to make sure that students understood what a diving board was, what a pool was, looked at some pictures, taught some vocabulary, and then had the students do the theme assessment. The 15% that I had quoted earlier during the guiding change was from another thing that I had done in targeted reading, but this is the pretest data that I was using for this particular project. So 38% of my students were able to identify the theme, which was slightly better than what I had noticed in my theme unit in targeted reading, probably because this story was at a slightly lower reading level. However, there were still 54% of kids that weren't able to find theme, and of those, 57% were able to correctly summarize the story, but 43% of the kids weren't able to do that. So it was close to a 50-50 split of students who both didn't know the theme and also appeared to have not understood the story. So once I had that information, I knew that I needed to do a little bit of learning on my end before I could start really delving into this with my students. So I consulted some works that I had by 3 different authors. Jennifer Saravio wrote a wonderful book called The Reading Strategies Handbook. And one of the things that really jumped out at me that I implemented into this learning project was some different anchor charts that she had designed to help students understand the difference between plot and theme, which I noticed was a huge misconception on both my pretest and just from conversations I had with classroom teachers. So we incorporated those anchor charts and came back to those throughout our unit. Jeff Sweers is a great writer on the topic of academic language, and one of the things that he really talked about was looking at the language demands of finding theme. And he has this really wonderful quote that I'm going to switch over to on the sheet. Here, students are still apprentices in the type of thinking needed to read between the lines and interpret deeper meanings in a text. We must be creative with scaffolding the complexity that has by now become automatic to us. And why I liked that quote was that finding theme, it's not just about being able to read a story and analyze it. There's also language involved in being able to convey that theme, as well as understanding those more complex texts that you would need to understand to pull out the theme. As an EL teacher, obviously language is very important to me. Things that he talked a lot about were providing things, giving examples of what is theme. So one of the things he talked about too, what I liked his work, was that his theme examples were more aligned with what the 5th grade classroom teachers wanted to see, which was not just a one-word theme, like, oh, the theme is hope. They wanted a sentence. And so Jeff Sweers gave a lot of examples about that and also provided us with some scaffolds for some different questions teachers could use to pull theme out for students. And then Beverly Darawanka is a pioneer in the field of functional linguistics, and her work, the reason I decided to consult her work was I was trying to figure out if there was one language feature that I needed to teach, what would it be? And so what I realized through that research was that subordinating conjunction showed up a lot. The theme of the story is blank because. So really helping students expand their ideas, because a lot of my Yale students might have been on the right track with theme, but they didn't give reasons. And so I wanted to teach that role of subordinating conjunctions. Additionally, subordinating conjunctions are used a lot in other units, so I felt like I would get the most bang for my buck with this. Then it came time to teach the actual unit, so I used Eve Bunting as an author study. What I liked about this particular author study and why it lent itself well to theme is that she has a lot of stories that do have a variety of themes so that students wouldn't get used to just finding one theme over and over. There was also an interview that we were reading as part of our author study where she talked about the themes of some of her books, so we could kind of compare what we came up with against the interview, which was pretty cool. At the front end, we needed to do some working definitions of literary terms, which I went over on our handout that I created for teachers. Big parts of this were reteaching and providing graphic organizers for finding theme. What I knew is that, and this makes sense when you think about it, is that students can't find the theme of something that they don't understand. So I had 2 different ways of summarizing stories for students. For my students who had a slightly higher language proficiency level, if we want to assign a WIDA number to that, I'd say a 2.7 on up, they used the Somebody Wanted But So Then graphic organizer. And this is something that they had all used in their classrooms before, so it wasn't another new thing for them. For my lower students, what I did was I would take pictures of key parts of the book and have the students write a sentence about what was happening in that particular part of the story. That visual support was really important for students. And then I did have one young woman who was a relatively new to country student, and so she was also provided a word bank to help with some of that vocabulary to sort of make it a more equitable experience so that she could still participate in these higher level thought processes while still having a lot of support. And then we also practice finding the theme across these different stories. But additionally, when I reintroduced theme, because like I said, we had talked about it in my targeted reading class, but I wasn't seeing results I wanted, we used a short video clip from Meet the Robinsons, which the link is in my learning plan. And it's a really heavy-handed video clip where there's a theme of never give up or making mistakes is okay, and it literally, the theme is written in flashing lights. But it gives the students a chance to see something visually and go, oh, yeah, the theme is this. It also had to do with growth mindset, which is something that we had talked a lot about. So the students were able to grasp onto that, and having that concrete experience, I think, made it easier to work on some of these more abstract stories where the theme maybe wasn't quite as obvious. Along with reading these different stories, we did some work with subordinating conjunctions. We did some language dives where we kind of looked at what are the role of subordinating conjunctions in something that I had written and something that Eve Bunting had written, and then also had the students practice building on their ideas. The theme is blank because, so lots of sentence stems. We did a gradual release of control. The first story that we read was The Memory String. And for that one, I did a lot with kind of modeling my own thinking. And then with the subsequent stories, for example, like Summer Wheels and Going Home, we had the students, I would ask more probing questions, and then we would let the students practice finding theme on their own. Really using those graphic organizers, doing a lot of things with some collaborative learning where they could bounce ideas off of other students before they were asked to find things on their own. And my sheet and my personal or my teacher learning map goes into some of the things that we did a little bit more, but then we did the post-test data. 58% of the class was able to correctly identify the theme. So it was short of the 80% that I wanted, but it was an improvement. With that said, though, 74% were able to correctly summarize the story, which was a refreshing jump in comprehension from before. For those students who weren't able to find the theme, 63 of them were not able to summarize the story. So this shows me that one of the shortcomings and something that I need to continue working on is providing a variety of comprehension strategies. Maybe there were some better graphic organizers or better things that I could have done to support comprehension. I know in talking with Lindsay here, we also talked about how having the students write it maybe wasn't the best way to measure student comprehension. It might have been beneficial to have the students tell me or do a Flipgrid, just to incorporate some multiple means for assessment. And I kind of touching onto that here, definitely scaffolding comprehension strategies. That is, I think, something that all teachers of reading are always looking at, is how can we improve comprehension. I want to make sure that I'm touching on theme in my targeted reading class before the classroom teachers. So we can do it in a smaller setting and get a little bit of practice and give the kids a little bit of a leg up before they are asked to do this in core reading with harder texts. And then this is something, by introducing it earlier in the year, I would have the flexibility to do a spiral review. If I go onto our handout here that I created, things that I talked about were just some of the different scaffolds that different level proficiency students might need. So looking at beginning, intermediate, and advanced. I'm talking about moving from that more visual to more of a graphic organizer. The importance of teaching the academic language, making sure the kids actually know what characters are. I touched a little bit about multimedia support, definitely that modeling and going through the process verbally, and making sure that we're gradually releasing control. So hopefully next year at Westwood Intermediate, we see a jump in our EL students being able to find theme. Thank you for your time, and I look forward to your feedback. Thank you.